Let me go ahead and start the meeting. Everyone, I'd like to welcome you to this second program in this series on COVID-19 and the Kenyan diaspora. But this week we decided to change the title a little bit and make it tackling the legal and business challenges of COVID-19 in the African diaspora in the United States, because we realized that a lot of these issues actually affect the African diaspora. One of my hats is serving as a commissioner on the Ohio New African Immigrants Commission, and actually some of the issues that we are seeing here have been coming up quite a bit. So we wanted to give the talk a little bit a wider appeal by referencing the broader African diaspora. But of course, as you know, Kenyans are included. So I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you for making the time to be here tonight. I'm sure there are many things you would have spent this time on, but we appreciate your time and your willingness to be here and to join us in this important meeting. As you might know, the series began when the Deputy Chief of Mission for the Kenyan Embassy in Washington decided to convene a meeting on COVID-19 to see how the diaspora is doing, and we have decided to continue the series, and actually he himself might actually be holding a few other meetings going forward to check on us. So, but of course, in some ways I can say that he represents many of the African ambassadors in DC as well in that capacity, in being concerned about the African diaspora and how we are dealing with this particular issue. And even in Ohio, from the governor and everybody else is significantly involved in trying to make sure that the diaspora is doing well. So tonight we have 4 eminent panelists that are engaged in the legal practice. I wanted to, you may have seen their faces on the flyer that I shared, or we shared 2-3 days ago. So we have Mr. Laban Opande, Ms. Mueni Raburu, Mr. Japhet Matemu, and Mr. Michael Okayo. So Mr. Laban Opande is a Kenyan American attorney based in Texas. He's the principal attorney at Opande Law firm, which has offices in Houston and Dallas. His firm handles a variety of legal matters, especially those that are in criminal defense, both state and federal, immigration law, looking at federal, at family, employment, investment-based, business and civil litigation, for example, premises liability, serious motor vehicle accidents. And he's currently heavily involved in aviation litigation, where he's representing several 2019 Ethiopian Airlines crash families against Boeing in Chicago. So he's also the interim president of the Kenya US Bar Association, KUSBA, which is an association of over 60 attorneys and lawyers of Kenyan descent who live and work here in the US. For purposes of this panel, he will mostly focus on matters of criminal law. Ms. Mueni Raburu is the managing attorney of Wanjoy and Muli Law that is headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina, with offices in Dallas, Texas, Boston, Massachusetts, Seattle, Washington, and in the DMV area. Those of you who don't know the DMV area, we are talking of the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, where she resides with her husband. Mueni is passionate about human rights and related issues, and tonight she will mostly speak about navigating family law in these COVID-19 times. Mr. Michael Okayo is based in Los Angeles, and his legal practice is mostly focused on commercial litigation, corporate law, and real estate litigation, specifically focusing on things like foreclosure defense, bankruptcy, and restructuring. He has over 10 years of experience and has worked for various firms in Los Angeles area before he started his own practice. He has counseled individuals and small businesses on issues like mortgages, tenants, financing issues, and will be able to address some of the issues and concerns that have come up in relation to this pandemic and the matters that have to do with business and some of the areas that he has mentioned, that I've mentioned. Did Japhet make it so I can introduce him as well? Japhet Matemu? Okay, he's not here.
He mentioned to me he's actually on the way. He should be in about 5 minutes. So maybe when he comes in, then you can introduce him.
Then I can introduce him. So in that regard, Laban, I think what I'm going to do is start with you. And you can start by giving us an overall picture and basically, obviously, saying a few things about what we can expect tonight, and then we can start going down the list. Laban.
Asante Sana, thank you so much, Professor Otiso. We're very grateful for hosting us. We also want to give our gratitude to Kefa, which is, I think, partly co-sponsoring this panel discussion. And more importantly, we want to thank all the listeners who have made it here to listen on the little that we know and that we can share as we live here as an African family in the US. Suddenly, this COVID-19 pandemic, as everybody acknowledges and knows, is something that, of course, perhaps many of us have never experienced, and hopefully we shall never experience again in our lifetimes. And so because of that, there is inherently going to be a lot of things that will change. And I think that, you know, the better we get ourselves moving with the new norm, the better we shall be. As part of that, obviously, is to remain informed of what's going on around us, and especially in the area of law. As you may all know, almost everything that happens on a daily basis, there is a legal background and a legal basis for it, be it the issuance of stay-home orders, be it the issuance of stimulus package, whatever it is, be it the issue of movement, meaning traveling. So there's a legal basis behind it. And for us, I don't think it's necessary that we are as detailed as law students, but I think it's about just being generally aware of what's going on so that we're not caught flat-footed in the event something happens or changes around us. I wish to say that we have a very good team in terms of the Kenya-US Bar Association, which is 60-member plus. I think it's probably about 63, and we are spread all over the country. So it's a matter of us as an African community to know where our folks are, where the resources that you may need are, and then reach out and get that resource or need that you may need. For today's discussion, I think we sort of split. I mean, law is very diverse, and we try to think about areas that may directly impact mostly our communities. So we kind of narrowed those into areas of issues dealing with immigration, issues dealing with family law, issues dealing with business for people who are entrepreneurs or business people, and then issues dealing with the civil liberties and the criminal issues. Now, I want to put a disclaimer that whatever it is that any of our panelists are saying or giving is really just merely an opinion that you may want to go and research or seek professional legal counsel for a specific matter that you may have. The other disclaimer I want to put is our discussion does not constitute a attorney-client agreement on any issue that we shall be talking about. So therefore, this is just a discussion. There is no relationship built between ourselves and you, Professor Otiso, or any other member who is participating in this panel. So with that, I just wanted to give that as a preamble to our discussions.
Thank you. I do see that Mr. Matemu has come in, so I guess I can introduce him quickly. Bwana Japhet Matemu holds a law degree from the University of Nairobi and a master's in law from the Washington College of Law, American University in Washington, DC. He's a seasoned litigator who has practiced for many years in the US and in New York in particular. He has worked for various large law firms in New York City before he opened his own practice that is specializing on US federal administrative law and immigration law. To the best of our knowledge, he is the first and only Kenyan to be admitted to the bar of the United States Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. In 2014. All right, so Mr. Matemu, you can wave at me so I make sure that you are hearing me. Good.
I can hear you, sir. I hope you can hear me as well.
I can hear you. All right, so I think then since Laban has made the introduction, I want to come back to you, Laban. There were some issues that were coming up, for example, particularly dealing with COVID-19, people being quarantined. What are some of the powers of state and local governments during this pandemic? The extent of emergency police powers, can I actually disobey them if I wanted to? I hope not. How far can government go in restricting our freedoms, for example? Can I be arrested? So maybe if you go down the list of some of the issues we had identified, then we can start with you in that regard, and then I'll be coming next to Ms. Mueni. But before we do that, I'll probably even ask the other lawyers to chime in before we move to family law. Mr. Opande.
Prof, thank you. And if you don't mind, because I don't have the benefit of the list as you stated, but if you list one question at a time, I can kind of quickly give a response to it.
Okay. So then the first one was
the first one was about whether government can restrict your civil liberties.
Yeah.
Is that what? Yeah. And yes, and of course, the legislators, the people we elect to Congress, whether it's in the state or national government, or even in the city level, council members in a local government who legislate and make laws, especially in this particular issue, we're talking about emergency laws that are put in place. They are valid and legal. I mean, obviously, all those also work with the background of our supreme law, which is the US Constitution, that those ordinances, those laws cannot violate the Constitution. But many times it becomes an issue of balancing between your personal liberties versus the majority of other people out there. The government has a duty, an obligation to maintain the health and safety of its citizens. So at that point, it becomes a balance of, should we not restrict you for the better of the larger community in terms of you having the ability to spread the virus. So that's the notion and premise behind it. So usually there's a balancing, and when the government does, it has to be reasonable when they do that. But as I said earlier, this pandemic, I think this is one that has, of course, been global. Now, emergency orders are issued almost very frequently, but in a very localized way, usually dealing with natural disasters when there's a hurricane or where there's some kind of a local event that the government has to address to protect the health, safety, and property of its citizens. So in a nutshell, in a quick answer, yes, the government can do that, but they don't do it in a vacuum. It is done through legislation in which our elected members make the laws for emergency purposes.
So then we did see some people protesting across the US saying government has no right to restrict my freedoms, and it's been a controversial issue. What would be your quick take on some of those demonstrations?
Well, I guess it's a question again of your personal civil liberties. Of course, they try to invoke laws like the First Amendment, which allows the freedom to speak or petition government. And that's okay. But then again, it's a balance. As much as you're free to do what you want to do, you cannot do it. There's a larger common good. Now, we do know, for example, after the 9/11 terrorist attack, there were a lot of changes in terms of how we perceived and did things. And initially, there was a lot of discomfort in actually fitting into those new laws or ways of life, walking through a scanner at the airport. being searched, at every entrance to a place. And people were feeling as though they were their personal rights were being violated. But when it's an issue of a common good, then it just becomes a balancing. So you're free to protest and picket and do whatever you want to do. But at the same time, you have to realize that your neighbor may not necessarily like what you do. And if a majority of those feel that they're not safe, then the government has a duty to enforce and protect them.
Yeah, I've heard the saying that, I'm free to do anything I want, but my freedoms end at the tip of your nose. And I think that's a good way of summarizing that.
Probably true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Then the other thing is, if somebody gets on the wrong side of the law around this particular time, what are some of the issues that they should be concerned about most? Because the courts are not operational, for example, so law offices may or may not be open,
Right. And well, the first thing I would advise is try as much as you can not to find yourself in that position, because we're living in a world whereby empathy is not necessarily freely given by officers or any law enforcers. So therefore, don't put yourself in a position that, and a lot of times it's a thing of common sense. And as much as we talk about it, a lot of us sometimes miss on that. Now, if you know, as you should know, that there is an ordinance that has been issued, a law that has a stay-home order that has been issued. So why do you want to go and try and test it to see whether it works or it doesn't work? I mean, that's when you're bringing yourself trouble. But in the event that you get arrested, one of the things that I've always told people, there are some numbers that you should have memorized because sometimes when they arrest you, they'll take away all your phones and belts and everything. Is memorize a number that you can call. Besides your wife and your mom, memorize your lawyer's number so that they can know where you are and they can help you to start arranging the process of either getting a bond, whether it's an attorney bond or some kind of a bond, depending on the jurisdiction that you are. Now, again, in trying to avoid that, because we're talking about a disease that is ravaging everywhere. Now, just know that if you get arrested, you're going to be put in a cell with other people that you don't even know where they have come from. And I can tell you, for those who have visited a jail or a detention center, it's not a very pleasant place to hang around. And nobody really gives, a care for how you are or the comfort you are, or whether you're going to be sleeping in the same cell with someone who is a carrier of COVID-19. So all I can tell you is just try and avoid as you can. But in case it does, always have mitigating factors. In fact, what I would say is, and this is something that most of us generally don't do, is have some funds reserved somewhere, because you're going to need some funds to be able to talk to a lawyer, to talk to a bondsman, so you can get out. I know it's a burden in terms of where our financial status is right now as a community, because unemployment is, is some crazy numbers out there. People have been laid off or furloughed. But anyway, if it happens, just know those are some of the basic things that you're going to require. So you better be prepared for those kinds of eventualities. But in the first place, it's like they say, prevention is better than cure. So just avoid finding yourself in a compromising position where you're having to deal with a bondsman or a detention center.
Yeah, and one last thing here very quickly before we go to the other panelists. Do you see that crime is increasing right now or not? And if it's increasing, what are sorts of crimes are increasing in this pandemic?
Yeah, so I tried to look around to do some real research on that particular issue. And quite frankly, it's a mix of both increase and decrease. And I think it's more about what type of crime you're talking about. So there's some crimes which have increased. For example, crimes of domestic violence have increased. And they allude that to, in fact, in some places I was reading, they have increased to 10 or more times than they were before pre-COVID-19. And well, we may not have the exact causes of that, but the presumption is that the stresses of life caused by this pandemic, with no outlet in terms of getting out, even just getting out to go and walk and breathe some fresh air, which releases the tension, helps mitigate issues of domestic violence. And I know my good colleague, Counsel Moeni Raburi, is going to talk a little bit more about domestic violence in a family setting, but that's an example of one which has gone up. But overall, other crimes like burglary, which means breaking of homes, even though comparatively in terms of breaking of business premises has gone up, largely because the people are not going to visit their workplaces or their shops. But in terms of homes, they have come down. So it's an up and down depending on what crime that you're looking at. But overall, in terms of crime in general, the numbers indicate that it has gone quite significantly down. But I think the fact that people are quarantined and the fact that there are orders of restricting movement probably are aiding that finding that crime has generally gone down.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that overall intro. I'd like to request those that are listening to start utilizing the chat, because we want to do the opening statements until around 10 Eastern time, and then we start taking questions from you. Ms. Moeni, I'm coming next to you. Please unmute. We want to start coming to matters to do with family law, which I know is what you practice a lot. So in general, we can categorize what you want to say in terms of issues to do with divorce, child custody, and domestic violence, which Mr. Opande has already mentioned. So you can perhaps make an opening statement on any of those and what you are seeing, and then we can go from there. Ms. Moeni.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I want to emphasize on Mr. Opande's disclaimer that this is not legal advice. I am an attorney licensed in the state of North Carolina. I practice mostly immigration law. We have offices all around the country. But the purpose of this meeting is for me to discuss family law, and I will discuss family law as it pertains to the law of North Carolina, where I'm licensed. Best thing is family law is not, is not equal all around. Family law, the law is there, thank God, but it's very fact specific. So I do not know the facts of your case. So this is just general knowledge to be able to get us more informed. I'll break it out to, I think, 3 different things in the areas that you've spoken to. I think I will discuss about what I think you should do during this time about those matters. I think what you can do about those things and what you must do, right? Let's talk about what you can do, what you should do, and what you must do. So we are in unprecedented times that we've spoken about this COVID-19. We were not prepared for it. It has gone more and longer and harder than we expected it to, but life has gone on, right? Life has continued in the midst of this. So many states, North Carolina included, have standing orders in place to cover issues of family law. And in addition to the state mandates, there's also county-specific mandates as it goes onto family law. So what I want that you can do is to reach out and seek help. You're not by yourself. Again, life has gone on. It's a pandemic. Things are hard. Things are different. But reach out and seek some help. Stay involved. Know exactly what is happening, and the information is out there. What we should do is do what is right, right? This is very difficult for everybody, right? You see, family law is messy, but do what is right. Take this opportunity to do the right thing, regardless of the animosity between the parties. What you must do is document. Documentation is important in the law, but during this time and in family law specifically, you having your documents is the winning or the losing of your case. And then be empowered and educate yourself. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and let people know about, how the issues of family law in this time, but educate yourself, be empowered. If you know something, you can be able to handle something that comes towards you. So let's talk about child custody. I think what you can do during this time is to have appropriate discussion with your children. You know, being at home, the positive of that, you have more time with your children. So discuss with them, let them understand what the dynamics are happening now about being at moms and being at dads and how things have changed. So have those discussions with your children. I think this will be a great opportunity for you to co-parent. That's the goal, is to be able to co-parent. The court looks at what is the best interest of the child. So take this opportunity to do your best and to attempt to co-parent. Things are difficult, so let's sit down, let's talk about it, let's try to work these things out. What you should do, regardless of what side you are at, again, is the reason that we are in court is because you as a mom and you as dad have decided you cannot agree on what to do, and you're asking a third party, the court, to make a decision for you. Take this time, let's talk it out. Let's do what the court is doing, looking at the best interests of the child. During these times, people would take advantage of the situation. It's child custody. The order says that we must stay at home. So I'm not exchanging the child with you on Wednesday. Don't take advantage, right? If you are the other parent, whereby the other parent is refusing you to have visitation, to exercise custody, document. I called you on Wednesday and asked you for you to attend the child, and you refused to do it. I texted you, and here's a proof of all the text messages that I had. I gave you solutions. Yes, I'm in the front lines. I'm a nurse. And so your excuse is that you don't want to extend the child because at my home, there could be an exposure into COVID-19, and you don't want to spread that. Well, I'll give you a solution. Let's meet at the park, right? And I'll keep my distance. Let's, instead of me doing every other day, let me just have the weekend, or let me give me additional time to have my visitation online, on Skype, on FaceTime. Find ways to find an equal ground. And if you're the person who the other party is taking advantage of you, document, document, document. I cannot, if I was your attorney, whereby we can go to court and we have all these text messages, all these phone calls, all these times you've tried to do an exchange and the other party has refused to, we are going to have a field day in court. Right? The judge will look at all these things that you have done. And remember, I mean, just because COVID-19 is there doesn't mitigate or take away my right to take care of my child. It's a constitutionally protected right for me to have access to my child. So you cannot use this pandemic as an excuse. And I'll tell you, when you go to court, when you go to mediation, it will not look good on you, the person who's taking advantage of this situation. Homeschooling, oh my goodness, everybody's complaining about it and saying how difficult it is, right? So as far as custody is concerned, well, let's work on that together, right? Document who was doing math and who was doing English, and at the end of the day, it will be good in court that you can be able to show the court how the child has progressed because of the effort that I have put. So for the child, it's important that both of you work on it to help with the homeschooling. And again, when you go to court, the documentation of what has been done will be very vital. If you're a party whereby you've been denied access to your child, you're not denied access to contact the school, contact the teacher, still stay informed. And when you go to court, you can tell the court, hey, listen, I had no access for the 2 months that, there was a stay-at-home order in my state, but I was in contact with the math teacher. I was getting copies of the grades, I was getting copies of the homework. So you have rights, you still have access. Even though the other party is limiting you, you still have access to know how your child is doing. If it's medical access and you have a birth certificate with your name, you still have rights and have access to being able to get your child's medical records or be informed about what's going on with your child. It's in social media world where there's different ways that you can get direct contact with your child. Do it, and again, get records of what steps you have taken to try to get access to your child. And again, if you go to court with all this evidence and a list of documents of what you did and the other party refuse you to do it, that it will flip really quick, and you may end up getting custody just because the other party was trying to play dirty. As far as divorce is concerned, you can still file for actions, even though the courts are closed. Most of them are trying to open up now or limiting access. Even though you cannot go before a judge, you still can go to the clerk and do your filing, or can do filing by mail. Again, there are county-specific orders as far as family law is concerned, or as far as the clerk of court is concerned, as far as filing. So get to know those. So you definitely can still file for the divorce, but what I would think about is, should I be completing my divorce right now? There could be benefits of you finalizing the divorce, or there could be disadvantages of you finalizing the divorce now. What can you do? Know whether or not I can file my divorce, know whether or not it's beneficial for me, dependent spouse, supporting spouse, to complete the divorce. You should do the right thing. So let me give an example of, if we finalize the divorce now, and maybe I was the carrier of the health insurance, my spouse will be required to go on COBRA. Well, be human, do the right thing. Maybe just let it fly for a few more months. Let me keep my insurance. And then you can finalize a divorce 4 or 5 months down the road, whereby maybe I'm get back to my employment, get able to get my own insurance. So they offer some grace where you can, if you have the power to be able to do it. Mr. Opanda talked about domestic violence. Domestic violence has increased, and it is so, so sad. It has caused domestic violence to be more severe. It has caused it to be more dangerous. It has caused it to be more frequent. You enclose quarters, getting along, not getting along, things have been difficult. And domestic violence can be between spouses. It can be a parent-child relationship, can be roommate situations. We are in this space together. Are we getting along or not? What you should do is get some help. There's a lot of local help as far as domestic violence is concerned, a lot of national help as far as domestic violence is concerned, and even socially, reach out to a community leader, reach out to the church. Don't sit there getting abused. And if you question whether or not that is abuse, right? If you're suffering any kind of abuse, reach out and get some help. There is resources available for you. Regardless of your immigration status, in our county, in Wake County, the state can offer you a place to stay. They can pay for a hotel room for you and your children, your victims of domestic violence. So get to know what is available for you, but absolutely you do not have to be with an abuser under any circumstance. And get help. You can be able to get help if you cannot reach law enforcement. Afraid to get law enforcement, speak to somebody else. Speak to somebody and just ask for some kind of leadership in the community. Talk to your neighbor. Call somebody and let them know and see what else they can be able to get for you. Unfortunately, the government was not prepared for this. That's why it has been so overwhelming as far as what is being processed. I mean, in Wake County, for example, domestic violence court looks like court as it was in January. I mean, business is going on as usual. So just because of that, just because of frustrating process, it's a long process, could be difficult. You could feel like you're being victimized over and over again. Do not give up. Get the help that you can and you absolutely do deserve. Financial obligations could come up in different ways in family law, be it as far as alimony is concerned, be as far as child support is concerned, equitable distribution. Is this the right time to finalize your divorce? What is the value of your house right now? What's the value of your 401k right now? What's the value of your stocks? Are you working or not working? Are you spending more money? The amount of money that was in your bank account, was it separate property or marital property or divisible property? Are you spending more of it right now? Again, it's important for you. Again, family law is fact specific, but you need to know what the law as it applies to your specific case and as to the state where you reside. So I would consider that about whether or not it's the right time to file your divorce and to finalize those things. And you need to document the fluctuation of the stocks of your house, what you have done to pay your debts, what debts you've had to incur, because I've had the children more than you have had, what expenses I've incurred because I was paying extra child support for the children who are not our children. So document all that you can. Are you able to keep up with a court-mandated order? If there's a child support order in place, there's an alimony order in place, you are required to pay that order. Yes, it's a pandemic. Yes, you've been laid off. So get ahead of that. Before the other party files a motion to show cause or a motion for contempt because you haven't paid child support for 2-3 months, well, file a motion in the court and let them know that I've lost my employment or my expenses have increased. I cannot afford what the court has ordered me to pay. So even if we go to court 6-7 months down the road, even though your arrears is so much, the court will consider, hey, she went to court and filed as soon as she could a motion to modify my child support or modify my alimony so you can be able to mitigate the expenses. And don't be that person that just because you haven't paid, that alimony on the day off, you run into court to file a motion. It's an emergency motion. I haven't received my alimony. Let's take this time to offer some grace, right? You do the right thing. If you can be able to afford the payment, absolutely make the payment. But on the other side, offer some grace. Do the right thing and just be kind about it, but don't sit down there and do nothing about your obligation. It's an order of the court. You can't be found in contempt of court, and you can be locked up for that. So be absolutely careful about that. And then document what it is that you have done. What amount of money are you spending? Is it more? Is it less? And the court would consider all that once we get back to court. Family law in my county is backlogged like nobody's business. I can only imagine how much crazier it will be once we get back with the backlog of 3 months. So regardless of that, the fact that your hearing will not be till February of 2022 doesn't mean that you shouldn't do what you're supposed to do. And documentation will be very key of what you do during that time before you appeared before a court.
And I think part of what you are saying then is that if people can resolve some of these conflicts out of court, at least for now, that would be a good thing. But obviously, people have to do what they have to do. But one thing I wanted to ask you before we go to the next panelist and we start thinking of questions is, are you seeing the divorce rate in the African diaspora almost at the same level as the general American population? Is it higher? Is it lower? I mean, anything you can think about in that regard?
The divorce rate, I wouldn't say it's more. I think we have an equal number of people who are coming through requesting for those services. I would say that over years it has increased just by the fact that I guess that stigma of the divorce or just people just growing apart with the working, being in a new country, new culture, issues with children. So I think over the years, as far as the diaspora is concerned, the divorces have increased, but I wouldn't say it's more or less as far as the American is concerned, but it's definitely more than we experienced in 2017, I would say that. And also a big thing is the fact about people being empowered and being knowledgeable about what their rights are and understanding that you don't have to be in a toxic relationship and there are options out there as well.
If I can add just something, Prof, before you move on.
Yeah.
I can certainly predict that post-COVID-19, because of the situation we have now and where we're heading to, there's definitely going to be an increase, not just in the African diaspora community, but in general, simply because the one factor that causes divorce is financial issues. So we already know we had about, 30 something million people unemployed nationally here. And so what does that mean? So there is a very high likelihood. So the issue is now, what do you need to do to mitigate? Well, what are you going to do not to find yourself in a scenario that you're facing a divorce? I think that's the challenge we're going to have as a community as a whole.
Yeah, and it's a big issue. So, and we're going to cycle back to some of these issues that may not have been covered by this part of the presentation, but I wanted to go to Japhet Matiemu a little bit. Part of what I'm trying to do is to get each of them to say something about their areas of interest for tonight, although they practice in many areas, so that actually those of you that are listening can get a chance to, a sense of which questions you might actually ask, because we'll be coming back to them fairly shortly here. So Japhet, if I can come to you, if you can unmute, there are a number of issues that have come up. I know that you mostly do immigration law, and there were about maybe 4 or 5 questions I wanted to ask you. I don't know, maybe I should ask you one at a time. One is obviously the issue of the public charge, which the new administration has brought in. You know, most immigrants are not going to be having a lot of money that, for example, sometimes they can basically use over a long period of time, but now COVID-19 has hit, you know, and people have lost jobs. And they were in the process of filing papers, and now they have to deal with this issue of the public charge. So in short, who is affected by the public charge rule, and who is exempt?
Japhet Matiemu, and thank you for that gracious introduction. Thank you, Mweni Muli, for that information. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Council Opande, Professor Kefa. So first of all, let me answer your question this way. People should not be so afraid of that public charge rule, because it is not as it has been hyped to be. First of all, the only person, the only immigrant or non-immigrant who is affected by this public charge rule is a person who is trying to become an immigrant through family petition. You know, either through the diversity visa, or you're outside the country, you're trying to get a green card to come in, or you're trying to apply for a green card here. So all the other categories, just about all of them are not affected by that public charge. You know, the U visas, T visas, all those types of people, okay? That's one. Number two, actually the public charge, that what amounts to, you know, like a public benefit are very few things. It's not a whole lot of things, you know. They are what are called means-tested benefits, okay? It is if you are, it mainly has to do with income support, housing, food stamps, you know, something from the social fund from states and, you know, the federal government, things like that. So there are a lot of other benefits that do not affect, you know, the public charge, that are not impacted by the public charge rule. For example, your stimulus check is not affected. That's not it's not a means-tested benefit, you know. It's like a tax return, some kind of an advance, okay? The other thing that people have been asking me is about unemployment benefits. Unemployment benefits are not affected. You know, they do not affect your, they do not raise the question of inadmissibility.
Okay.
Now, the other thing we must remember is how long have you been receiving this public charge? Because, I mean, these public benefits, because it is not the fact that you have received them that's most important. What's most important is, are you likely to receive them in the future? That is the determination. That's a question. Are you likely to become dependent on the, on public funds? Not whether you have received them in the past. So there will be a long list of. It basically is discretionary. It has been left to the consular officer or the immigration officer to decide if you're likely to become a public charge, because they look at so many things. You know, your employability, how much education do you have? But the main consideration is how much you have received in the past in terms of public benefits. But one thing you need to know is that you can limit those. If you receive public benefits for more than a year out of the last 3 years, now that's where the problem starts. But if you got public benefits for a month, or you went to a hospital to have your baby and you receive some public benefit, or it was a temporary thing, that is unlikely to affect you. But they look at everything, like to the consular officer or to the immigration officer. Do you look like a person who in the future you might be dependent on? Okay. So it's not, there's a lot of politics infused in this public charge thing, and people are confused and they don't know, but it doesn't affect every immigrant. It's only those who are trying to become, permanent residents through a family petition or through the diversity visa. Two, it's only the means-tested benefits. It's not all, there are very many benefits that are issued by states and, local governments and things like that. And the fact that a member in your family is receiving public benefits, that has no impact on you. And there's so many other rules. I think if people have more specific questions, we can address them at that time.
Yeah.
So let me go to the second part. As I said, I've practiced for about 12 years now, but I practice immigration law. But a lot of people think immigration law is just about filling papers and sending them to immigration, and then they start sending you work authorizations and things like that. That is just one part of it. I focus more on the litigation part, taking cases to court or do removal proceedings. Board of Immigration Appeals, if somebody has been ordered removed, those cases are referred to me, I take them on appeal. If the decision is not satisfactory at the Board of Immigration Appeals, then I take them to the Federal Courts of Appeals, the Circuit Courts of Appeals, all of them. And as you know, immigration law is federal law anyway, so you can do it almost anywhere. So when it comes to, what can I say in relation to this? Okay, first of all, I'm a litigator. I know there are people who talk about, the filing for immigration benefits and things like that. But right now, we must, how does immigration practice really relate to COVID-19? We have talked about the public charge issue, okay? So let's get that out of the way unless people have more specific questions. Now, the other things about bonds, when you're detained by immigration, you need somebody to apply for, to do a motion for your bond, and now we know what's happening in those detention centers. COVID-19 has ravaged a lot of detention centers, so it is very important to remember that to reach an attorney as quickly as possible to try and secure a bond, or if you can, if you feel like you're able to file your own, but it's best to have somebody from the outside, an experienced attorney, to do that for you. So we need to get our people out of detention. All of us, we must do as much as possible to get our people out of detention, because COVID-19 is ravaging those detention centers. The other thing is called habeas corpus, things like that, and, if you've been detained for so long, you don't know what's happening, and you think that your detention is unconstitutional, you think it is not right, those are things to do. We must get people out of detentions. And even if you have an old case and you're thinking that you might be arrested at this time, it is time to think about doing a motion to reopen your case so that they don't have a reason to come and detain you. Let's say you got a removal order back like 6 or 7 years ago. Obviously, you've lost your right to reopen the case or do in the regular process or to appeal or something like that. But there are other ways of reopening your case so that you have a case that's pending. When you have a case that's pending, it becomes quite unlikely that they'll come get you at your house, okay? And things like that. So the other thing I wanted to mention as regards my practice is that we must also think about filing, defending ourselves in federal court or advancing our rights in federal court. We have a lot of our people that have been, they are arrested, they're charged in court, they're found not guilty, and they just walk and they just go home. Now that is the basis of a very strong civil rights case for malicious prosecution and a lot of things like that. You can turn around that case, take it to federal court, and win against, against the people that took you over there. Just don't sit around and do nothing. And the other thing is asylum.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who have a lot of questions about, asylum and who qualifies, who doesn't qualify, what do you have to show to the court, how do you defend yourself in immigration court, how do you prepare your case, how do you do things like that. So instead of me talking about it, if anybody has any specific questions, I'll be more than happy to take those questions. And again, I thank the panel for setting up this, this event today, and I look forward to engaging with everybody.
Before we go to the next person, maybe you can comment briefly about students and their, F1 students and what are the options right now? Has the law changed substantially as far as you can tell in terms of F1?
No, but I don't think the law has changed very much. But as when immigration law is involved, there's a lot of discretion also that is involved. I mean, immigration law is basic. Immigration benefits are made to a very large extent, even if they're statutory, they are also based on a lot of discretion from the officer that is looking at your case. It's always, is it reasonable for you to do this or to do that? You couldn't go to school. That's, you can find an exception to that. You are unable to, to pay your fees, or you're unable to maintain 12 credit hours and things like that. Look, we don't have a lot of regulations that have been put in place at this time, to change anything to do with students. But there are those students who cannot go home because of this. There are no flights and things like that. That is a good reason to explain as to why you overstayed your visa or something like that. But these things to do with COVID-19, and so many things have happened at the same time that people are still wading through what are we going to do with the regulations. So we don't have anything that's clear, but I don't think anybody should feel threatened by the, violating the immigration status, or there are visitors here and they can't leave. Go ahead and, and file, an application for extension of your non-immigrant visa, whichever kind it is, whether it's a visitor's visa or anything, just go ahead and do that. That's a good reason to file for an extension, as long as you can document it.
All right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And
Prof, may I add something real quick in terms of the F1 students?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, just to kind of go back to the question you asked, whether the law has changed. The law has not changed. The law is the same as it was last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. There are policy issues that arise because of change of administration, which really are more about how are they handling certain issues, but the underlying law is still the same. But I wanted to comment about the students, which I think is a good, we have a good number. Many of us came here as students. And what I can suggest and call upon the community as a whole is that those students do need our support as a community. We have to reach out to them and find out where they are and how they are faring on. Because I believe most of them are probably in a very vulnerable position, because if they lived in a dorm, they lived in an apartment complex in the school, and now the schools are closed, and they don't know what to do. Now, if there are any of them listening here, my first point of reference would be their student advisor, the international student advisor in the school that they are. If they can go and find out what is the school providing in terms of their stay, at least their comfort. But next, they should start thinking about what would they need to do to maintain their status. And like Mr. Matemu said, if you have a good cause, good reason why you have overstayed, my assumption is probably they haven't overstayed because they're still, I mean, the assumption is school is still going on. And it's only that when they miss to go to school, the school reports them as having failed to go to school, that they actually fall out of status. Then that's when the trouble begins. So they have to be proactive and reach out to the school and find out what the school can do. And then obviously they can also reach out to a lawyer. And like I mentioned earlier, we have a bar association of Kenyan lawyers, 60 plus members spread all over the country. We can be able to provide them with some guidance at no cost, because we know they're students, and we can be able to tell them the basics of what they need to know and where they need to go, so that they can find. Many of us came here and we were helped by people who were here and they guided us, and that's why we're able to sit here and talk to all of us as we're speaking today.
Well, thank you, and Mr. Pande, for that addition. And I know that for those that may be listening to the tape later on, and they are not necessarily Kenyans, we do have a number of other African immigrant lawyers also across the country that will be more than happy to advise the students. I want to go to presenter number 4, Mr. Michael Kayo, to talk more specifically about the business law. Michael, I'd like to list some things. Maybe you can try and touch them as you know, when you start talking, and then which actually will also jog people's minds in terms of what they should actually be asking you. So one of the issues that obviously has come up is I'm not able to pay my mortgage now. What are my options? You know, now that maybe I've lost a job and those types of things. What are some of the mortgage reliefs that are going to be available? Can I defer my mortgage? Those types of issues. That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, I'm a renter, and for the same reasons, I may not be able to pay rent. What do I do? You know, so maybe you can start with those 2, and then we can go to the business section for people who own businesses.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Professor Kefa, and the co-panelists and the audience for making the time. Glad to be here. Yes, so with regards to mortgages, first of all, we talked about police powers before with colleague Opande, and here's a case where, in my opinion, you really like police power, because in most capitalist countries, or economies or systems, private property is protected, but here's a case where the government is telling your landlord, you know, hey, you cannot increase rent. Hey, you have to give forbearance. If you have, you know, FHA, HUD, or any kind of federally backed loan, then these are the relief we are requiring you to give to the tenants, you know, as part of the COVID relief package or available options. So that's one area of police power that, you know, I'm sure all of us appreciate. So going to mortgages, first remedy, especially this time, the immediate thing you can get is foreclosure, not foreclosure, foreclosure moratorium, but forbearance. So forbearance simply means, you know, you can just tell you, let's say you've lost your job, you've been furloughed, you've been paying your mortgage consistently for a while, but now you can't because, of course, you know, you've been furloughed or you lost your job. So forbearance is just, you can say, hey, for the next 3 months, could you, give me a break on the rent and, find a way, maybe push it to a later time, or after things get back to normal, you can spread it, or whichever kind of accommodation your your lender can give you. So that's one remedy. Another one is there's a moratorium on foreclosures right now. So the federal government using its same, not necessarily police power, but I would say as the insurer of last resort. So FHA, like I said, HUD, they passed a moratorium on foreclosures. So basically they say, hey, Mr. Lender, you cannot foreclose for the next 180 or 120 days. So that's around, I think it started in March, and it should go on till somewhere maybe around July. They could even extend it. So that stops them on their tracks. They cannot do any foreclosure. So that's a very powerful remedy or powerful move that the government can make. This is private loans, a private contract. The government is coming in and telling, your lender, hey, you cannot do anything. So that's a very powerful one. Mm-hmm. And another one also, I do practice bankruptcy. So during normal times, bankruptcy was one of the most important things that people used, and in particular, Chapter 13, what is called Chapter 13 bankruptcy. So if you fall behind in your mortgage and, your lender starts giving you notice of default, and then they'll have to give you notice of sale under their trusteeship power, under maybe a deed of trust. So one of the things you can do is file Chapter 13. So Chapter 13, it's called an income earners, bankruptcy. So with that, you can take your arrears and spread them over a period of a maximum of 60 months, that is 5 years. And then you can also continue making your mortgage payments, your regular payments. And in bankruptcy, you get something called an automatic stay. So immediately you file, you get an automatic stay. The lender is stopped from doing anything. They cannot do a credit report. They cannot do unlawful detainer. They cannot do any sort of foreclosure on you. So they cannot file any kind of suit. If there was a lawsuit pending or anything like that, all that is stopped. So that was one powerful remedy before the COVID. But with COVID, these are other things. If you don't want to file bankruptcy, or bankruptcy is not necessarily the best option, depending on your circumstances and what your prospects are post-COVID, or if bankruptcy will affect other areas of your life, then forbearance is one immediate remedy that you can avail yourself. And it's very simple. All you have to do is just say it's pandemic related. So they've made it so easy. So all you have to say, tell your lender, hey, this is pandemic, this is COVID. You just say pandemic related and no further questions. They have to give you some kind of a remedy. I believe most of them have some kind of standard paperwork, or the government recommends, yes. So that's one important remedy. As a renter also depends on the city. So cities also have power, cities and states. So for instance, in Los Angeles right now, where I am based, they just passed some anti-rent increase ordinances, or city, I don't know if to call it ordinance or just like a policy. So they say you cannot increase rent more than 5% going forward. And then they've also put a moratorium on evictions. So using the same police powers that we talked about earlier. So those are some of the remedies available. As a small business owner also, you can avail yourself certain loans, and that is payroll, to pay your staff, and what is called EIDL, but we could talk about those later.
Yeah, and that's a good introduction on the personal side. So maybe we can raise some business matters for a minute here. Issues to do with the business owners and contractors. What are some of the government-sponsored financial relief funds that I can access, and how do I go about applying for them? I think some of these are like enshrined in the CARES Act, for example. And this is an area I'm even hearing from my own state. A lot of our immigrant businesses don't really take advantage of some of these government programs, even in normal times, like SBA and the like. Maybe you can comment on those as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, that is very true. And yes, a lot of people, even during normal times, SBA has been available. It's nothing new. It's been around for long time. And I guess it's probably maybe lack of knowledge or even not necessarily the immigrant community, the diaspora community, even the normal Americans, small business owners, they don't avail themselves of all these facilities. So with regards to COVID, one thing that's available, like I mentioned, what the so-called PPP. So PPP is sort of a paycheck protection program. So that is meant, let's say you're an employer. Let's say I run a restaurant, or I'm a salonist, or I'm a barbershop. So PPP is meant for you to continue that as a way of retaining your employees, because this is temporary. And if I don't want to lay them off and have them looking for other jobs, or face a situation where, okay, now things have opened up, I want my employees back, but they've already moved on. So I want to keep them around. So the government sort of supports the employers, the small business owners, so they don't lose their employees, and it will be back to, start once things get back to normal. So that's the purpose of the PPP. And PPP also, you get almost immediate, sort of like an advance. Once you apply up to $10,000, you can get it almost immediately, even as they process your paperwork. So it's almost automatic. But the only problem is most of it you have to go through your bank. There's also EIDL, which is a normal, just a regular economic injury, disaster loan. And that is different from the PPP, but that one, you can apply as much as, maybe 2 million. I guess they had it at 10 before, and a lot of these big corporations benefited from it. And the first tranche, which was 350 billion, you had companies like our Los Angeles Lakers was getting 10 million, and a small business is missing because the 350 billion disappeared in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So they had a second tranche, which was 450 billion, and, Congress, particularly the Democrats, they intervened and said, no. Now this is just for strictly small businesses. So with this, I think they reduced it to 2 million maximum. But you can get little facilities like also 10 up to 10,000. And also depending on the number of employees that you have, you can get an immediate advance, 1,000 per employee. So if you have, let's say, 5 employees, you can access immediately 5,000. That comes within, let's say, a week, less than 2 weeks after you apply, even as they process your application.
And I'd like to mention that this money is available even to people who are sole contractors, so business owners, because sometimes people think you have to employ 10 people before you can benefit.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's a good point. So yes, like, as I mentioned, saloonist, I mentioned a barbershop. So ordinarily, these are not what is considered like small business, but independent contractors. Actually, technically, I believe I can be my own employer.
Yep.
Let's say, hey, I run this barbershop and I'm the one, cutting hair, and I don't have many employees, or maybe I just have one assistant. I will also be an employer. So I can get $1,000 for me, and also maybe paycheck protection for me also. What else did I want to mention? So like the good thing about the PPP and also the payroll, if you use the money for payroll, actually it sort of becomes a grant later on. That is, it can be forgiven. So that's another point, thing to bear in mind. Otherwise, it's somewhere between 2.7 to 3.75% loan, and it's long term. So you can as much as 10, 20, or 30 years to pay. So which is good deal. So it's really such a relief.
So if you follow the employees, will they sue you, or it's probably a better way of doing it so they can go on government unemployment for 2 or 3 months, and then when the economy picks up again, you can rehire them back?
Yes. Another good question. Yes. So yes, if you follow, so this is meant to kick in immediately so that you don't face that situation that, you've followed your employees and you still, you don't know what to do. So they're still, technically, they're still your employees.
Yep.
You're running out of your cash limit, you're running, cash limitations. So what do you do? So that is meant to immediately relieve you of that. You still, even if you follow, so long as you technically have not laid them off, you've not fired them, you still owe them their payroll, so you have to find some short stop measures to, come up with the cash, because under the labor laws of this country, that's one thing they, even as a debt, even in bankruptcy, what you owe your employees takes very, very high priority. It's almost up there with child support, IRS, all those are priority debts. So yes, you would still owe, but take advantage of this COVID-related relief so that you don't run into a situation where you're getting sued.
Okay.
Another thing that we could talk about later is with regards to opening up, and then you have this OSHA, occupational safety hazard something. It's a federal requirement with regards to environment, your employee environment. So there are certain things you have to comply with. And one thing that is being debated right now is when you open up, somebody come and say, I contracted COVID through, you didn't put enough measures. So more people are afraid, like, hey, we have to keep distance and the break room is not compliant, blah, blah, blah. So Congress is working on that right now. It's a debate that's going on, how to shield or whether to shield employers from such claims in the future. So lawsuits might, come even as we open up.
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
No, Prof, I just wanted to add a few things before we lose track of what Council is talking about.
Yep.
The issue of the PPP advance loan, and I know these things are going to come later on. Please make sure you keep your records for payroll, because after all is said and done, you're going to have to prove that the money that you were given was actually used for payroll. In fact, they warn you when you get the money that make sure that this money you're being used to authorize expenses as per the guideline given by Congress in advancing these monies. The other thing I want to add real quick is about small businesses, is that a lot of people who run, let's say they run a taxi cab business, and all along, they have been basically hiding the numbers in terms of what they make, because they are getting cash in hand. So now, therefore, they underreport to IRS. Now, this is where it catches you, because remember, you are being paid, or there is a formula they're using to advance you the funds. Even if you are a sole proprietor or you're running your own business, it is on the money, on the income that you are making. So if you have been lying about how much you make every year in your taxes, whereby you end up getting $13,000 a year as your income, you see now why lying catches up with you. So it's a good thing to do the right thing, as my sister Council said, always do the right thing, and then you don't have to worry about it. Another quick comment I wanted to make is be encouraged to properly run your business. Seek counsel in terms of structuring your business so that you you don't have to incorporate, but you have good practice, good habits in terms of running a business. Because when moments like this come, they are looking at your records, for the past year or past practices in terms of how your business was being run. Another quick comment I wanted to make is about the local programs given For example, here in the Houston area, the mayor as well as one of the commissioners in one of the districts have gotten some funds to assist families in paying rent. So reach out to your local governments for those programs. Essentially, just be in the know. Don't be aloof. Don't just live as if you live in your own. I know we are quarantined and we're living by ourselves, but at the same time, be of the know of what's going on, so you get to help yourself. You can only be your own best advocate when it comes to any matter that relates to law. Otherwise, if you don't do anything, and as they say, you just become ignorant, then ignorant, they say, is not defense.
I think one thing I wanted to add with what you said in terms of making sure the money is used for payroll is, if you get this money, I would advise people to basically work with a normal payroll processor, companies like Paycor, because they can do all the right deductions for you and actually create the paper trail that you need to prove that actually the money was spent for what you said it was going to be used for. So which basically goes along with what you're saying, that it's better for people to run businesses as above board as possible so that it doesn't cause problems. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, and
go ahead.
And just real quick, so that's with regards to PPP. So I just want to clarify that. Yeah. PPP is what is meant for payroll. So the other loan, there's another loan that is not necessarily for payroll. So yeah, just to clarify that.
And then the other thing, Michael, before we leave you here and start now taking questions from the audience, I think mortgage relief means that even if I get 3 months not to pay, I will still be back like 3 months, yeah? And I will need to make up the missed payment somehow. Isn't that the case?
Yes. So yes, it's the forbearance. So forbearance is not basic. It's not forgiveness. You know,
okay.
If I can put it that way. So forbearance is, yes, it means for these 3 months, give me a break, but they can spread it over a period of time, or they can put it at the back end. So when your loan comes to an end, they might put it or extend your time, or maybe just make you pay it at the end. So depending on your lender, you can work it out, or whatever way they want to do it.